Welcome to today's live session. I'm Riya Pramanik. So we are starting with our course BPSC 144, that is Introduction to South Asia. Unit 4, that is political structures and processes in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. These countries, we will be knowing about its political structures and processes. So, this chapter is solely based on the political structures and processes in these particular countries, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So, there is a reason why these countries are clubbed together that we will get to know in our later session, because these three countries are very, very interconnected with each other. India was divided into two parts. One part remained India, and the other part became Pakistan, which comprises of two areas like West Pakistan and East Pakistan. The west part was the area in the western part of India, and East Pakistan was there. That is in the eastern part of India. Both these two parts together became one Pakistan. And later on, this Pakistan was again bifurcated, not bifurcated, it was divided because of a revolt by the East Pakistanis that became Bangladesh. So India was divided into two. It was India and Pakistan. Later on, Pakistan was divided into two, one Pakistan and the other Bangladesh. So let's start with the introduction of this unit. So India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, now three different nations of South Asia, were once part of India and since ages. So as I already discussed, that India was the country from which Pakistan was created, and later on Pakistan was further divided and Bangladesh was created. So initially, since ages, these three nations was a part of India only. So these nations had a shared history, civilization, and culture, because we all these three countries were one. So they shared their history, civilization, and culture. And also the colonial experience under British, who used the divide and rule policy. All these countries faced that same issue, same experiences, because Britishers were used to govern in that place. They used to rule there when it was united, and they also used that divide and rule policy. So, all these three countries faced years of subjugation by Britishers and produced several standards of the Indian freedom movement. So, these countries were together. India, when they were all together, they they used to took part in the Indian freedom movement. So the aim was to defeat the British, to end colonialism and free the motherland India. So what was their aim? It was to defeat the British rule, defeat and why? Because colonialism was very exploitative and discriminative. So they wanted to get rid of that colonialism and from the British. So the British partitioned the subcontinent on basis of failed two-nation theory into a Hindu majority India and a Muslim majority Pakistan. So India was divided into two parts, Hindu majority India and Muslim majority Pakistan. So the areas where Muslims were in majority, that was created as a different nation known as Pakistan. So Pakistan carved out on 14th August 1947 comprised two parts, separated physically and linguistically. So Pakistan was created on 14th of August 1947, and it was consisting of two parts. The one was the West Pakistan, the other was the East Pakistan. Later, the East Pakistan emerged as a separate state, that is Bangladesh, in the year 1971. So Bangladesh's birth was possible due to India's direct and indirect intervention, both diplomatically and militarily. So you can say that when there was a revolt, there was a revolution going on, there was a war between the two parts of Pakistan. India directly and indirectly intervened in that situation, both diplomatically and militarily, which ultimately led to the creation of a new nation by dividing the erstwhile Pakistan comprising of east and western part, and it created the Bangladesh. So India became the first country to recognize Bangladesh as an independent nation. So it was India who recognized this country, this newly formed country in the year 1971 as an independent nation. Now we will be seeing about, we will read about the political processes and structures one by one about these three countries. So we will be taking one topic, that is, for example, we are discussing about the constitutional status, and in this part we will be learning about all the three countries. So one subtopics and all the three countries we will be learning. So it will help us to understand to how they are similar and how they are different from each other. What are the similarities and dissimilarities between these three countries which were earlier a part of one nation? So let's talk about the constitutional status, and we will be starting with India. So with the promulgation of the constitution in 1950, India became one of the largest democracy in the world. As we all know that India's constitution was it was prepared in the 1949, but it was started and it was accepted, it started taking place properly from 1950s 26th of January, that we celebrate that day as Republic Day in India, and that was the day when this constitutions was enacted, and it is considered that India became one of the largest democracy in the world, because in our constitution it is written that India is a democratic nation from now onwards. So it is the greatest civilizational republic, shaping it into a sovereign, democratic, and republic. So India was a sovereign nation when there is no what do we mean by sovereign? When you don't have any other country to interfere in your external and internal matters. So earlier, when India was under the colonial clutches, India's decisions was taken by the Britishers. But now onwards, India is a sovereign nation, and that is the reason why India will be taking its decisions solely without the help of any other country and without their intervention. Why India is democratic? Because India is following a free and fair elections. Regular and elections are held in a regular intervals, and the head or the leader is selected by all and not through a monarchy or hierarchical positions. So India is democratic, and also there is India is also republic where the head of the state is elected and not inherited. So if we want to understand what is republic, then we can take example of India and Britain. So in Britain, it is not a republic country. Why? Because the head of the state is not elected, but it is the monarch, that is the royal family of the Britain is the head of the state. So that is why India is republic, because its head of the state is elected and not a monarch. So, the Government of India Act of 1935 has been the strongest influence on India's constitution. So, as we are learning about constitution, it is the India Act, Government of India Act 1935, which paved the way, which solidified the base of the India's constitution. So, the Constitution of India, which came into effect on 26th of January 1950, was prepared by a committee led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So, who was leading the committee? The drafting committee's chairman was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and there were several other committees headed by various personalities, various leaders, various freedom fighters who worked together working to form a single constitution of India for the well-being of the people who are just got free from the clutches of the colonial empire. So the Constitution of India came into effect on 26th of January 1950, and on that day we celebrate our republic. So the Indian Constitution established India as a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. So it provides for the parliament consisting of two houses. So now we will be seeing what are the how the parliament is shaped. So it has two houses. Rajya Sabha, that is known as the Council of States, it is an upper house representing the states in India. Whereas the lower house, we often heard this word Lok Sabha, it is the house of the people which represents the whole of India. So whoever is living, whoever is the citizen of India, they are represented by the lower house. So the constitution provides a written constitution for a parliamentary form of government, which is federal in structure with certain unitary features. So Indian constitution is written, and it is available in written form, and it provides for a federal government. So the president of India is the head of the state, and the prime minister of India is the head of the government. So it is very important to understand why I said that India is a republic country, because head of the state is president in India, and it is the prime minister who is head of the government. So when you have head of the state as president and you elect your president not directly but indirectly, at that point of time you can say that your country is republic, because the head of the state is not chosen by and not inherited that position. So the powers of the center and the states are mentioned in the seventh schedule of the constitution. This is something you should remember, that all these powers of the center and the states, they are mentioned in the seventh schedule. The 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments in 1993 added a third tier at the local level. So this was the time when Panchayati Raj institutions were established, and in these two constitutional amendments, the third tier at the local level was also introduced. Now we learnt about India. Now we will move forward with Pakistan. We will be learning about the constitutional status in Pakistan. Pakistan's two constitutions of 1956 and 1962 failed to provide the desired political stability. So, as we are learning that India is continuing with only one constitution, we had only one, and we are still following that. But not all countries follow that. Not all countries faces same situation, because there are many problems, many anarchy that disrupts the country's political stability. In India, we had only one constitution, but here we are learning that Pakistan has two constitutions, which failed to provide the political stability that they desired for. So, what were the two constitutions, and in which year they came? It is in first one in 1956, and then in 1962. Both of these constitutions were short-lived and were superseded with martial laws. So here we will be learning that how military and army is overpowering the government and the elections in Pakistan. So the Pakistan's present constitution of 1973 declared Pakistan as the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, recognizing Islam as the religion of the state. So the constitution, which is still there in Pakistan, it is enacted in the year 1973, and it said that Pakistan is a Islamic Republic. So they recognized Islam as the religion of the state. Excuse me. So who drafted this constitutions? It is the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto government who drafted this constitution that came in 1973. So the constitution is parliamentary nature. So like India, Pakistan also followed the parliamentary form of system with a bicameral legislation. Bi means two. So there are two different houses. So the constitution defines the nature of the states, its citizens, and their fundamental rights. So Pakistan's constitution also have fundamental rights and other things mentioned as like Indian constitution. The constitution also includes clauses requiring the legal system to follow Islamic injunctions found in the Quran and Sunnah. So, what is different here from India? That is, here the Islam religion is, first of all, they considered it as a Islamic state. Secondly, they also have some interventions and some inclusion of the Islamic injunctions that you could found in Quran and Sunnah, that is present in their constitution. So in case of India, India is a secular country, and that is why no holy books and religious teachings were included in our constitution. It is basically it avoids that, because India is a country where there are so many religions, they coexist together, they inhabit together, they stay together. So that is different from Pakistan, because Pakistan was made as an Islamic country. They wanted a separate state for Muslims, and that is the reason why their constitution have some interventions from the religious text, because they follow that, they believe that there should be some interventions or good teachings should be there in their constitution, and they added that in their legal system. So it is the supreme law of the land and it is sacrosanct. The Constitution of Pakistan said that it is the supreme law and it is sacrosanct instrument which reigns supreme in the governance of the state. So the Pakistan is a federation. So how Pakistan is created? Pakistan is a federation consisting of Punjab, Sindh, the Northwest Frontier Province. We also called it as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and Balochistan. So these are the places which comprise this Pakistani land, and the president is the head of the state and the prime minister is the head of the government. This is quite similar with Indian case. So this constitution established and the bicameral legislature consisting of the Senate, that is the upper house, and the National Assembly, that is the lower house. So here is a bit differences, because though India also follow a bicameral legislature, but the names are different. We call it as Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. Here in Pakistan, they call it Senate and National Assembly. The work they are doing, that is same, but the names are different. The terms are different. So the president was given the power by the Constitution's 8th Amendment Act of 1985. So what were the powers of the president? What was the power of the president that Pakistan used to have in Pakistan? So the power is to dissolve the national and provincial legislatures and dismiss the elected governments at the federal and provincial levels. So the president has all these powers, and this amendment changed the Pakistan system of government from a parliamentary democracy to a semi-presidential democracy. When you provide so much power to a person holding the position of president, it is bound that it will turn from parliamentary form of government to a semi-presidential system, because they have power to dissolve the national and provincial legislatures, and also they can dismiss the elected governments at the federal and provincial levels. That is a very big power that is provided to the president. So the 8th Amendment strengthened the authority of the president, that came in the year 1985. Later, the 18th Amendment of the Constitution of Pakistan was passed in 2010. So on 8th Amendment, it was written that the president will be getting so much power, but on the 18th Amendment that came in 2010, it removes the power of the president of Pakistan to dissolve the parliament unilaterally. So it makes a constraint on the powers of the president of Pakistan, and it turns Pakistan from a semi-presidential to a parliamentary republic. So again, when initially it was a parliamentary form of government, and then it was moving towards semi-presidential system. But now with the coming of this 18th Amendment Act, we can say that it turned the Pakistan from a semi-presidential to again a parliamentary republic. So again, the army is once again trying to change this 18th Amendment to get more political control. So Pakistan is a place where there is a huge influence of the military government, and military, army, martial laws. All these things are very much found in Pakistan, because when there was a chaos in the country after the death of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, already the country was a newly formed nation, and when the leader who was leading that movement died in such a short period of time, it provided for a very anarchic situation in the country, which ultimately it transferred all the powers to the army, because army was there to control the situation, and since then it was the army, the military, which gained so much power that they started ruling the nation. So this is the reality of Pakistan, where they were facing so much irregular elections because there was interventions of the military, and that is why whenever there is an elected government, they try to dissolve that, they try to get rid of that elected government, because they wanted more political control. So now let's move forward to Bangladesh. So the Constitution of the People's Republic of Bangladesh is the supreme law. It defines the republic, how Bangladesh's republic is defined. It is defined as the republic when it is unitary, parliamentary democracy with fundamental human rights and freedoms, an independent judiciary, democratic local government, and a national bureaucracy. So this is how Bangladesh defines republic, and it invokes constitutional supremacy instead of parliamentary supremacy. So this is one thing which is very different from other countries, that they invoke constitutional supremacy instead of parliamentary supremacy. And Bangladesh constitutions came into effect on December 16, 1972. So the state's religion is Islam. Similar to Pakistan, they also considered their state religion to be Islam, which was adopted through the 8th Amendment that came in 1988. Sorry. So all powers in the republic belong to the people, and their exercise on their behalf shall be carried out solely under the authority of the Constitution. So under the Constitution of Bangladesh, the Prime Minister is the head of the government. The President is the head of the state. This is very similar in all these three countries. The President is the person who will exercise the powers and performs the duties conferred on him by the Constitution and any other law. So the Parliament, this is very important. The Parliament in Bangladesh is called as Jatiyo সংসদ in Bengali and House of the Nation in English. So the Jatiyo সংসদ is the Bengali term, which literal meaning in English is House of the Nation. So Parliament of Bangladesh is unicameral. This is very important because this is the difference we can notice from the other two countries we are reading today, that is India and Pakistan. In India and Pakistan, it is the bicameral legislature, whereas in Bangladesh, it is unicameral. So according to Article 65(3)(a) of the Constitution, of the 350 seats in Parliament, 50 are reserved for women. So this is also a very important point to note down. Out of 350 seats, 50 seats are reserved for women. These women members are indirectly elected by the political parties. So the number of total reserved seats is distributed between parties based on the proportion of seats they have in the parliament through the process of single transferable vote system. Now, let's move to our different topic, that is status of rights. We will be learning about the status of rights in both the three countries, as we done, just like we done previously, that how constitutional status is different in these countries. So the leaders of India's freedom struggle realized the importance of rights. So the visionary leaders and founders of India ensured that these rights must be included and protected in the Constitution of India. So as we all know, that India was going through a very tough time during the colonial rule, and that is why the leaders, the founders of India, they wanted that there must be some kinds of rights that could be protected by the Constitution of India. So it is to avoid any kind of misuse and instability in governance. So therefore, these rights were enshrined in the Constitution of India in the form of fundamental rights in Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. So Indian people, Indian citizens are given these fundamental rights that is enshrined in our Constitution in Part 3. It is mentioned that from Article 13 to Article 35 under different categories of the fundamental rights. So there are many fundamental rights. There are 6 fundamental rights that is mentioned from Article 13 to Article 35. So ordinary legal rights are protected and enforced by ordinary legislations, whereas fundamental rights are protected under the Article 32 of Indian Constitution. So all apart from these fundamental rights, there are many other rights provided to Indians, but the fundamental rights, you can, if it is not fulfilled, if someone infringe with your rights, you can go and you can claim that how your fundamental right is not protected, like they are not, fundamental rights are such rights which if it is never fulfilled, you can go and complain and take help from the judiciary, whereas in case of other rights, you can't complain, you can't go if it is not fulfilled. So the rights are protected irrespective of caste, religion, region, sex, race, place of birth, etc. So as we all know that India is a diverse country where we have several castes, different religions. There are many different geographical locations. People here have different race. They have a place of birth difference in that. So in a diverse country like India, the Constitution of India protected the rights of the people irrespective of all these differences. So this is all about the rights in India. Let's move forward with Pakistan. So according to Constitution of Pakistan, all citizens are equal before the law and are entitled to equal protection of the law. So the Constitution of Pakistan provides that citizens have equality before the law and they also be protected equally. So the Constitution contains 25 rights in all. So this is something which is important to note, that Pakistan has a constitution which provides 25 rights altogether. So 15 of these articles discuss civil and political rights. The rest of the 10 articles discuss social and economic rights. So the people of Pakistan have 15 civil and political rights with them, whereas the 10 rights that is provided to the citizens of Pakistan, that is social and economic rights. So Article 8 to 28 of the Constitution deals with all fundamental rights provided to the citizens of citizens of Pakistan. So let's talk about Bangladesh. So the Constitution of Bangladesh provides fundamental rights that are aimed at overturning the inequalities of past social practices. So as we all know that these three countries has a very brutal past, because they faced so much, they were exploited so much during the colonialism. Also, these three countries faced that brutal riots that occurred during the partition and during when people were moving from this place to that place during that partition time. So all these things were kept in mind when the constitution makers was framing the constitution. So the Bangladesh constitution prohibits any kind of discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, sex, color, place of birth, and it prohibits trafficking of human beings and forced labor. Other fundamental rights include freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, and the right to education and public health care. So these fundamental rights has been enumerated in the Constitution from Article 27 to 44 of the Constitution, and all of these rights are civil and political rights. Now, let's talk about the role of judiciary in all these three countries, starting with India. So judiciary plays a very vital role in Indian Constitution. Indian Constitution envisioned a single integrated system of the judiciary for the whole nation. So we have a single integrated system in our country, and it plays a very important role. So in India, the Supreme Court is the apex court that acts as the final interpreter and guardian of the Constitution. So who is taking care of the Constitution, whether it is followed properly or not? It is the Supreme Court of India, that is the apex court in our country, and it holds the power as the final interpreter. So its decision is binding as per constitutional provisions, and it administers both the union and the state laws. So at the state level, there is also, apart from Supreme Court is at the apex court, but there are many high courts which deal with the state matters, and there are also district courts at the lower level. So Nyay Panchayat, Panchayat Adalat, Gram Kacheri, all these three units functions in India at the grassroots levels based on the principles of natural justice. So these Nyay Panchayat, Panchayat Adalat and Gram Kacheri, all these things are they are present in the rural part of our country, and they are based on the principle of natural justice. Let's talk about the judiciary in Pakistan. So in Pakistan, there exists a formal division between the judiciary and the executive branches of the government with a three-tier judicial system. So Pakistan's judiciary consists of the Supreme Court, the provincial high courts, and the district courts, which works under the high court's jurisdictions and supervision. So the judicial system of Pakistan focuses on religious dimensions with an inclination towards Islamic values. So this is something which is different from India, that in Pakistan they focus on religious dimension. Because India is a secular country, there is no role that religion plays in the judiciary. Whereas in Pakistan, we can see that they have an inclination towards the Islamic values. So the code for Islamic law Sharia is called the Federal Shariat Code, established in 1980. So there are a separate Shariat code that exists in Pakistan. And also we should understand and we should remember that the independence of the judiciary in Pakistan has been tested at times, because Pakistan faced such turmoil after it got independence. So at that point, when there is anarchy, when there is chaos in the country, the judiciary has been tested many times in Pakistan. Since its formation as an independent nation, there have been 3 occasions when military coup have toppled the democratic government. So here we can see that how in Pakistan they face military coups sometimes and also democratic elected government. So in 3 occasions, when military coup toppled the democratic government. So under such circumstances, the judicial system of Pakistan not only failed to check the extra constitutional regime, so it also endorsed and supported illegal gain power. So because the political system is unstable in Pakistan, so that is the reason why judiciary was not able to perform how it's supposed to be. So theoretically, Pakistan's judicial system operates independently of the executive branch. And however, the reality is different, as the establishment wields significant influence over the judicial branch. So these are the things that is being a challenge for Pakistan. Let's talk about Bangladesh's judiciary. So in 1972, Constitution of Bangladesh provided the structure and functions of the Supreme Court and subordinate judiciary. So by the separation declaration in the year 2007, the subordinate judiciary, particularly judicial magistrate courts, were separated from the executive. So, but effective separation is yet to be established. So there are interconnectedness within the executive and judiciary, but it tried many times to separate it from the executive interference. So Article 115 and Article 116 of the Constitution of Bangladesh have empowered the President to make appointments of judges, judicial magistrates of the subordinate judiciary. Also, President had some limitations on the exercise of all his powers, his or her functions. So he or she has to act to the directions of the Prime Minister as per view of Article 48(3). So it means that the President can exercise all of his or her functions at the desire of the Prime Minister, who is the executive head. Let's talk about the role Election Commission play in our country, all the 3 countries, starting with India. So the Election Commission of India is an autonomous and permanent constitutional body. This is very important, that how Election Commission is there in our country, how it started and what the role it plays. It is also very important because it is something which provides help in making our country a democratic throughout. So this election commission is responsible for organizing free and fair elections for Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and the state legislative assembly. So all the elections that happen in our country, like in Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and state legislative assembly, this is the responsibility of election commission to take care of all these elections. So the Constitution of India has empowered the election commission for direction, superintendence, and control of elections to parliament, state legislatures, the office of the President of India, and Vice President of India. So Election Commission of India is known for conducting the world's most extensive democratic exercise in free, fair, and transparent manner. So it is something which is very important, because India is considered to be as the largest democracy in the world, and in such a vast country with such vast diversity, where there is democracy which is prevailing, Election Commission plays a very important role in keeping India as a democracy. So it is considered to be as the world's most extensive democratic exercise. How? Because it is done because the elections was free, fair, and transparent. So, in a historical move in order to conduct free and fair elections, recently the Lok Sabha has passed the Election Laws Amendment Bill in the year 2021 to curb the menace of multiple enrollment of same person in different places. So, what this was taking care of, that there are many people who have their name enrolled from various places. So, it is something this election laws amendment bill was passed to get rid of this problem. So this bill not only aims to purify the electoral roll but also promises to reduce the electoral malpractices. So this is what Election Commission do in India. Let's talk about Pakistan's Election Commission, which is an autonomous, independent, and permanent body. So it is established body responsible for organizing and conducting election to the national parliament, provincial legislatures, local governments, and the office of the President of Pakistan. So the commission performs functions and conducts nationwide general elections as well as for the by-elections decided by the election commission itself. But the commission suffers low credibility. So this is something which is very important to note down. All of these reasons are because the instability that Pakistan used to face from time to time. So it is due to the structural inability to effectively monitor and control political funding in the country. It also faces problem in checking the issues of booth capturing and low voter turnout. What is booth capturing? When people used to capture a particular election booth and they change the results, and low voter turnout means when very low number of very few number of people turn out to give vote, because all of these happen because of less awareness, and there are many reasons why this low voter turnout is a big problem for Pakistan. The main reason is the lower the awareness is, the lower the turnout will be. So again, because of all the chaos and chaotic conditions, all the anarchy that exists there, it is the result how the people don't want to come and vote. So other major issues in Pakistan is to select the 5 members election commission. It is a challenge due to lack of consensus between the prime minister and the opposition parties of Pakistan. So all these problems were facing by Pakistan regarding the election commission. Now let's talk about the election commission in Bangladesh. So in Bangladesh, the election commission is an independent constitutional body which is responsible for conducting elections in a free and fair manner. So it is Article 108 of the Constitution of Bangladesh which provides for settling up the election commission. So election commission is responsible for the superintendence, direction, and control of the preparation of the electoral rolls for election to the office of the president and the parliament. So this is how the election commission used to work in Bangladesh as well. So the president appoints the chief election commissioner and other election commissioners in Bangladesh. And recently, the election commission of Bangladesh had drawn heavy criticisms from its citizens. So what are the reasons because of these heavy criticisms? The reasons were, first one is the attacks on the opposition party members. Secondly, voter intimidation, vote rigging, third, and fourthly, it is the partisan behavior by election officials in the pre-election period and on the day of election. So all these reasons were there, which questions the credibility of the election commission of Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is facing all these problems, and this is something which we should understand. Now let's talk about military, starting with India. So we will be learning about Indian Army, Indian military, how it works, whether it is connected with our politics or not. All these things are very important to know the political structures and processes of a particular country. So we will be talking about the role of military, starting with India. So the partition of the military in politics is a characteristic of weak democratic institutions. it is something you should see, you should mention, and you should remember that whenever there is influence and intervention of military in the politics, it is something which weakens the democratic institution. So the civil military relation in post-colonial India is a model example for other countries. There has been a significant increase in military capacity without any threat to political setup. So here in India, there is no mixing, there is no interference of military into the politics. The Indian military is apolitical, which owes its loyalty not to any individual but the Constitution of India. So here, the Indian military is not favoring, is not loyal to any individual but to the Constitution of India. It symbolizes in the president who is the supreme commander of the armed force. So in India, it is the president who is the supreme commander, and without his assent, the Indian military can't do anything. In India, the military plays a very important role. It is considered to be a very essential pillar for India's democracy, which remains a formidable public institution of the country. So India's military has played a vital role in defending the nation's sovereignty and territorial integrity and providing disaster relief. So all these three things are taken care by the Indian military. It also played a significant role in holding essential values of secularism, discipline, integrity, and loyalty. So Indian Constitution provides for a military that will be secular, disciplined, integrity, and loyalty. It will focus on these four principles. Also, it has remained independent and indifferent to the party politics of the nation. So, whichever political party came into the power, our military, the Indian military, will remain neutral, will remain separate from the politics of the nation, and it will only focus on defending the sovereignty of our country, the territorial integrity, and also providing for disaster relief. Now let's talk about military in Pakistan. In Pakistan, the democracy is hybrid. Why? Because there are situations when there are civil military relations, which has been a central issue in the governance. So sometimes it is the civil government, sometimes it is the military government. So that is why there is a hybrid mode. Army dominates the civilian governments, including natural resources. This is something which you couldn't find in India because Pakistan's military is far more political, far more powerful, and it started dominating the civil government. Also, it has it has their scope and they have reach to the national resources. So Pakistani's army has a long history of intervening in country's politics. So it used to intervene since the inception of the country, and it is also at the forefront of disrupting the democratic process in Pakistan. Because army is so powerful in Pakistan, they don't want the democratic government to exist because that can curb their powers. So during the military regimes, that army personnel were given lands, licenses for businesses. They were heads of big corporations and business houses. So whenever there is military regime, all these things are happening. So these military officers had emerged as the new class of landlords and wealthy businessmen. So in present scenario, it is widely claimed that Pakistan army controls the democratically elected government. Though there is democracy now going on in Pakistan, but it is believed, it is claimed that Pakistani army is influencing that government. So military in Pakistan also referred as the state above the state. So this is a very important thing to note down, how the military is so powerful that it is considered to be as the state above the state. In Bangladesh, it has changed its course from a militarized politics to a politicized military. This is a transition that Bangladesh faces. So the killing of the first president, that is Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, by the direct involvement of army officials led to the establishment of the military rule under the leadership of General Zia-ur Rahman. So The first president, who was Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was in the forefront of the liberation struggle that took place in Bangladesh. Uh, they by he was killed. He was assassinated by the direct involvement of the army officials of the country. So you can see how military was so powerful in that country. So the armed forces' role in aiding civil administration is also controversial. So Bangladesh enacted a law in 1996 introducing a system for the supervision of polls by a neutral caretaker government. In 2011, this system for elections was scrapped through the 15th Amendment. So now let's talk about the role of media. Media and society influence and form each other. Media are also directly linked to politics. So you have to understand this close connectedness. India's media played a significant role in awakening the masses against the colonial rule during the national movement. So here you will imagine how role of media could be there in the national movement. So don't forget that radio is also considered to be a media through which national struggle was awakened among the people. Like the struggle that India was facing at that time, all the things were transported and all the things was gone. The awakening was spreading through the radio. So the broadcasting of news resulted in massive mass movements regarding the process of the nationalist movement in India. Also, newspaper played a very big role in this time when nationalist struggle was going on. There were many curbs also provided by the colonial government on these newspapers and magazines, but there were many newspapers, magazines, books, all these things which were trying to awaken the people of India. So after independence, the post-independence media, mainly the free press, played a significant part in building of a democratic India. So also after independence, the media was very important and it played a very significant part. The media is considered to be as a fourth pillar of democracy, plays a pivotal role in generating vox populi. Also, we can say the voice of the people. The media has helped to shape the democratic society. It is by giving the emphasis to issues such as human rights, corruption, childbirth, childcare, domestic violence, and sexual harassment. So, media also bring forth all these problems that Indian peoples are facing, which further makes the country more democratic because the voice of people was coming out. So it gives rise to virtuous cycle of transparent policy, making cleaning government, curbing corruption, and faster economic growth. So in case of India, media played a very crucial role in its development. Now let's talk about Pakistan. So since its inception, in the year 1947, there was no stable democratic system that could be established in Pakistan. So, since its birth, we can see that the Pakistan government is not able to continue with the democratic process because there were many times when military rule came and they went out. So there was a chaotic condition that exists in Pakistan since its inception. So in the last decades, Pakistan's media have experienced many restrictions, and also Pakistani media only amplifies the various societal problems and hesitates in discussing the critical government policy freely and issues related to cross-border terrorism. So, although the media highlights the societal problem that exists in Pakistan, but it also could not cover the news or could not cover the issue like the government policy, how it is going to, whether it is failing or whether it is providing good things. So, government policies are not discussed, and also the issues related to cross border terrorism. That is something because of which India and Pakistan are rivals, and that is something that the media is not highlighting in Pakistan. So journalists in Pakistan face increasingly repressive environment who are often on the receiving end of hate, threats, and abuse for publishing, writing work online. So whenever any journalist, any newsreader tries to cover the issues relating to cross-border terrorism and critical government policies, they were repressed, they were dominated, and they used to receive hate and abuse and also threatened by the people in Pakistan. Let's come to the role of media in Bangladesh. So, in Bangladesh, the role of media dates back to the War of Independence. So, in its liberation struggle, media, mainly the radio, played an essential role in inspiring the freedom fighters to go forward with bravery. So, this media provided a zeal among the that time. It was East Pakistani who started taking notes and who started taking inspiration from these radio newses. And after the independence, media played a vital role in the development of politics during the political crisis in different military regimes. So the situation changed with the curtailment of freedom of media since the last decade. So there are other different kinds of oppressions over media with control of media houses by the ruling groups and too much control on social media by law enforcement agencies. So this is something which we should understand that how in Bangladesh as well the media is oppressed by the ruling groups. So therefore these policies have created a hostile environment in Bangladesh for democratic thinkers and freedom lovers. Now let's talk about the pressure groups. In a vibrant democratic country like India, pressure groups have played a crucial role in shaping the politics of the country. So, pressure groups are something which is very important, which provided a space for the people to come forward and keep they can their mind can be listened to, whatever the problem they are facing they can come up with that. So India's pressure groups are agents of political socialization. They help in formulation of public opinion, lobbying with the bureaucracy to influence the process of policy implementation, and help in improving the quality of the government. So pressure groups provided for a healthy democracy where public opinion can be expressed freely, and they can also come with improving ideas, and also they can come with the issue that is not addressed by the government yet. So pressure groups also enable new concerns and issues to reach the political agenda, thereby facilitating social progress and preventing social stagnation. So India's pressure groups complement the work of opposition political parties by exposing the wrongdoings of the government also, and also they improve the accountability of decision makers to electorate. So it is very important to have some kinds of pressure groups which will keep a watch on whatever the government is doing, whether it is doing it correctly or not. Now let's talk about the pressure groups in Pakistan. Following the establishment of Pakistan, various pressure groups representing the big landholders and business established their primacy in the political process. So it manifested in active participation in the political setup and penetration into policy making and political processes. So the military in Pakistan, alongside the intelligence, have been extremely authoritarian, ruling for almost half of the history of the country. So the military, as we are learning through this unit, that how military is always there influencing the government coming into power in Pakistan, which is a very big concern for the people living there. So overall, there are three major interesting fault lines in Pakistan's political scene. Let's talk about that. The first one is between the civilians and the military. Alongside, it is amongst different Islamic and among different ethnic and provincial groups, and also between the Islamist and the secularists. So they have very differences in all these ideologies, and this is impacting their political scene. Now, if we talk about Bangladesh's political pressure groups, the overwhelming effect of some pressure organization is conspicuously visible in Bangladesh. So, in the evolution of the independent Bangladesh, students' contribution and their supreme sacrifices are to be recorded. So, in Bangladesh, students are very active and their contribution is immense. So, apart from these students, others also play an influential role. And let's name them. The first is the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity, Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, Federation of Bangladesh Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Association of Madrasa Teachers, Development and Advocacy NGOs associated with the Grameen Bank, environmentalist labor rights advocacy groups, NGOs focused on poverty alleviation, international trade, religious leaders, etc. So we can see that apart from students, all these other institutions are also playing a very important role as a pressure group, and all these committees have separate problems, different opinions, and issues that they want to be listened by the government. And you can see all these institutions and organizations are talking about different sectors of the government and the country. Like, for example, madrasa teachers have their own concerns, whereas people are there who are talking about the environment and the labor rights, and then there is worker solidarity group also. So there are different issues, and for that there are different kinds of pressure groups. Let's talk about the status of minorities briefly about India. So, Indian Constitution recognizes religious and linguistic minorities through Article 29 and 30. So, Indian Constitution provides a separate and special provision for the rights of the minorities, and they have also a separate ministry. So, in India, Muslims, Sikh, Christians, Buddhists, Jains, and Zoroastrians, that we often called as Parsis, they are considered to be the minority communities in India, and they consist of 19.3% of India's population. If we talk about Pakistan, in Pakistan, basically it consists of 96% of Muslim population, and Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Christians, Parsis, Shias, Baha'is, and Ahmadis are considered to be the minorities. So in Pakistan, it is basically Muslims are 96%, and the remaining 4% consist of all these religions. Also, it is said that from 1947, the minorities consist of 23% of the population, but now it constitutes merely 3 to 4% of the population. So, unlike India, minorities in Pakistan have a negligible presence in key public institutions of the country. So, you can't find them in a very good position in the country. Their condition is so much worse. Now let's talk about Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is also a country which have Islam as their state religion, and Hindus, Buddhists, and Christians are minorities there. So minorities have a very minimum representation in Bangladesh. Whether it is parliament or cabinet, you find very limited people there. So the situation of Hindus in Bangladesh is also very critical due to the continuous discrimination and violence against them in everyday life. So Bangladesh is also facing a problem regarding their minorities. Now let's talk about civil society. So civil society in India mainly derives its strength from the Gandhian principle of voluntarism, and also a recently successful example of involvement of civil society, we can find it in Swachh Bharat Mission, which is considered to be as the largest behavior change program in the world. Also, it is the largest Jan Andolan India had witnessed in years. So, civil society is very active in India. Let's talk about Pakistan. So, since Pakistan's independence in 1947, the structural dynamics of the state formation, legitimization, and consolidation have hampered the emergence of civil society. So, despite the fact that the intensity of independence movement produced a sense of solidarity, but unfortunately, nation development has been sacrificed. So this is something where civil society in Pakistan struggles to raise its voice. So let's talk about Bangladesh. The role of civil society in the independence movement of 1971 in Bangladesh was immense. But since 2018 elections, the space of civil society is shrinking due to heavy crackdown and criticism by the government, which has resulted in the deterioration of the domestic polity of the country. So, with this, we are ending our this chapter, that is chapter 4. For our next class, we will be completing Unit 5, that is Political Structures and Processes in Sri Lanka and the Maldives. So, in this class, we will talk about all these three countries. In the next, we will be moving ahead. So, thank you.